Over the last several years, SolarWinds has really invested a lot of time and energy in, number one, releasing Orion maps, and number two, improving on them. And with me, I have Jeff, who's going to talk all about maps. But first, we're kind of going to talk more in a general way.
Yeah, I hope you booked enough time here, Kevin, because I could talk about maps for hours. So.
Yeah, I think you have. I've seen you do it at Swags. I've heard you do it on Lab, and I've seen all of your posts on Thwack. So I know you have no problem with that. So
yeah, absolutely. I get long-winded in those responses on Thwack too, but there's a lot to talk about. I'll try and stay on track here. And maybe we should just start with like you said, a general question, like why do we even bother with maps?
Now, I'm one of those people that said, I don't need a map. I was a network engineer. I know that this is plugged into that. So when there's a problem that happens, it's just like, oh, well, it's there. You can see it, right?
What about other teams or people in your organization?
It doesn't matter. I'm the network engineer. I know where things are, and everybody should be at least as knowledgeable as I am, plus their specialization, right?
And that's a good point, Kevin. I mean, we would all love to be experts in everything in our world, right? But we're not all just network engineers, right?
Yeah, I guess it's true. I know that when I had a problem and management would come to me and say, hey, is this service up or down? I would be like, of course it's up. See, it's right there. And they would just kind of stare at the screen and I would get so frustrated. But I think it's more about how to present that information.
Exactly. And that's fantastic. And that's really the purpose of these maps, right? We want to bring that ability for users to visualize their data in unique and interesting ways, right? Sometimes the age-old cliche, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Really resonates with our users when they've got this influx of data coming in from the Orion solution and all this information. Really, to simplify that through some visual means makes a big difference.
Yeah. And being able to turn data into information and then make decisions off that information is the important part, not just for you as the monitoring engineer, but really for the other teams that you work with. 100%. But the request that I've always heard, and I hear it all the time, is when we ask people, I know you've heard this working at Booths, I know you've heard it at Swag, is when you say something, well, what would you like on a map? And immediately the first response is always everything. And everything map is garbage. Sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And everything map is worthless in the grand scheme of things.
Well, it can make sense to some people. I'm not even going to play it either.
Yeah, don't even play devil's advocate here,
right? Like it's when you just spew everything in a map, it's going to be a little bit overload. Now, there's some unique cases where you can spin some things into maybe just a service level dashboard and all sorts of stuff, but we really want to make that information, like you said, actionable, right? Mm-hmm. Take that data, transform it into information, make it actionable. And I think the way to do that is maybe with more specific use cases. And maybe we'll talk about some of that here.
Yeah, I'd love that because an everything map, yes, I want to be able to see everything kind of at a 10,000 foot view. But at a 10,000 foot view, I don't necessarily care how hot this interface is running on this one thing that has no bearing on the top level service. So it's all about scoping it and slicing and dicing and presenting it in a good way.
Right. And we have these things today that are really about delivering a service, right? Mm-hmm. And delivering that service is not just about the application, like you just mentioned, right? It's not just about the servers that system is running on or their virtual infrastructure that's tied to, or the cloud infrastructure, or hey, what about the network path that takes to get to each other or to the user, right? So all these pieces come together into this service, and really we can combine all of those into a map.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the relationships that the Orion platform kind of auto detects, because there are not just one, not just two, there's a whole plethora of them. And I think you have a decent example to get us started. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can use this example to kind of talk through some of that customers may not be as familiar with. So I think it's a great starting point. So when we're talking about Orion, and Orion is the platform, right? For many of the folks listening on the call, they are already aware of that, but obviously we have some newcomers as well. So Orion is just the base platform. We have products like NPM, SAM, and vMan and Storage Resource Monitor and all these different products that tie in and add more information into the system. Here, what we're seeing in my example is a set of my domain controllers. They're fairly aptly named. And right now, you can see that some connections were automatically built for us. And these are really being built by the application dependencies. Those are brought to us from SAM. So these application connections are based on the ports being detected and some other magic behind the scenes, but they may not be everything to the equation, right, Kevin?
Yeah, so we only dropped these 4 things on that map, the ones you're showing on the left-hand pane there. But we're already detecting that we've got replication between DC 1 and 4, 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 1 and 2, and then across between 1 and 3. So in only 4 elements, we understand how the replication is kind of configured already for this domain controller environment.
Yeah, that's right. But before we kind of touched on this a little bit, it's also about, okay, this may be the extent of a map that makes sense to one group of users, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the Active Directory administrators, right? But maybe if we're talking about it holistically as a service, maybe we want to add additional things. So there's concepts in maps that take advantage of that data in Orion, right? So I can actually click on these things and see show related connected. Now, there is a difference between the two here, Kevin, right? So show related is kind of all about the dependencies inherent across Orion. So if I'm looking at a server, for example, and maybe I'm adding some volumes or interfaces or something like that, those are dependencies to their parent object. Those are, simple dependencies. There are also things where we have infrastructure that relies. So if this is a VM connected to a host, and we can actually bring those elements in. Now, we've done some magic here in the system. I've already set some things up. So I'm actually going to use this fun little undo redo option and click on that and bring up the Hyper-V side of the equation connected to these couple of application servers.
And to do that, we obviously did with redo undo, but you could have just said, show me the related entities for DC4, and it would have brought out the maps hypervisor 01, which then would have its another related level where it shows the C drive for that, correct?
Exactly right. So we would see all related entities to these guys, and we can pull some of that out. We just don't have to go through the pain of going ahead and adding it. We'll have tons of different entity types, right? Again, interfaces, other applications, memory, lots of different things here. I have the ability to toggle between those types so I can filter even further and then add those to the map. So pretty easily.
Yeah.
Clearly, I expected maybe some other infrastructure that was supporting these servers.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're physical servers. Oh, no, they're connected to a vCenter.
Yep, exactly right. So it's really cool how we can pull that out. Now, we talked about, both of us have a little bit of network engineering backgrounds, and those are important pieces here. And I think, specifically when most are blaming the network, right, we want to make sure that's a part of the equation.
It's never the network. It's never the network.
Right. That's right.
So it says all network engineers, just
exactly.
Putting it out there.
Exactly. So we can add that in, and these are a few switches that were pulled up, but there is one piece missing, right? Do you see what that is?
Those are 2 completely separate maps. They are not interconnected.
Right. You are correct. So unfortunately, in this case, I happen to not be monitoring some aspects of these hosts on my environment. So what I am able to do is actually create that connection. Now, we did this on purpose. I wanted to show off the fact that, hey, there's a design tool aspect here, but there's also the ability to take this much further. So using this connections feature within Orion Maps, I'm actually able to say, hey, you know what? From Transit Switch 3, I understand and know that I want to connect this device. So I'm going to pick an interface on one side. And actually on this opposite side, I'm not even monitoring any interfaces on this host. So I can actually still change that up a little bit and put in Transit Switch 3 here again, and I'm going to choose the same interface. So when I only have an interface on one side, I can still simulate the connectivity between these objects. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I would have run into a lot on WAN circuits, because you own the last hop in the CPE, the customer premise equipment. So you own that, and you know the IP, and you know that this particular interface is going out to somebody else, but you don't own the far side gear. So being able to say, I connect this interface to it itself, essentially, but show one side ingress and one side egress, you still get good data out of that. And I like 100%. The second option we have here, where you can kind of tell it, oh no, I want to make this change globally. So basically put this in as a custom dependency, because I know it's going to exist and we don't want it just for this map.
Exactly, Kevin. And that was a great point. And really that's where this feature came from, exactly as you described, because people want to see that edge device connected to that cloud or out there. So you can simulate in the same way. We can add an image, connect to that image so they can follow through with the same piece. But to your point, I can do this connection just for this map only, which we'll probably do for the purpose of this map.
Sure.
But I can also do it kind of what we call for all Orion. And this makes it to where this topology connection now shows up if you're familiar with the NPM topology widget, and where you can see a breakout of all the connections from this node. We can see it there. There's static contextual maps of Orion maps on each and every entity in all of Orion. You would see that connection there. You would see this if these were added to another map in the future. So it's a really cool way to define topology through the design tool here. Mm-hmm. So we'll create this guy, and I'll go ahead and do it on the other end as well.
Now, obviously, in a real environment, we wouldn't just randomly select, the first fast Ethernet on it. We would select the actual one we know, based on hopefully the description they've put on the port says this is uplinked to the Hyper-V host, and you're like, cool, that's the one I'm going to run with. But yeah, being able to actually do this quickly and easy, and this is easy. I mean, and you've just done it in 5-6 total clicks, I think, maybe.
Yep.
And
pretty much.
Now we have everything from the core switching layer to the access switching layer, and then out to the hosts. Those hosts, of course, host the VMs, and those VMs are chit-chatting with each other, and they're in completely separate infrastructures. So for you, me, and kind of the monitoring admin, this is my map. If people say Active Directory, I say, this is my map. I want to see all of this.
Exactly. And we can take this much further. So why don't we enhance this a little bit more and show you how to do some of the neat features that were recently added that take this, where, hey, it's great, it's good how it is, it's really showing me all the connectivity, but I want to make it really sing for the users in my organization and what they're expecting as far as icons, maybe some of the text here. We can jump into that.
Okay, yeah, because let's be serious here. Although all of everything on this map is important, the thing we actually started with were the domain controllers. So
that's right.
Those I kind of want front and center, and yeah, they're centered in the map, so that's great, but they're not bubbled up in any way visually.
Exactly, and I love that, because just because we have all these entities on a map, not every entity is as priority as the other, right? Mm-hmm. So we can actually do things where we'll introduce this properties panel, right? And to start off with, we have size and position like you were talking about, so I can just make those a little bit bigger than the rest of my environment here, and we'll just knock that out here.
Okay, so you just changed the pixel size, and it because we actually have the lock thing in there, it's actually respecting the aspect ratio.
That's right, yeah, because we have objects that we can add. We probably won't do that in this map, but we can add shapes such as squares or circles and all sorts of things. Again, giving users the ability to add that extra additional context to different things on the map, different elements to the map. So we can size things differently, unlock aspect ratio, even change rotation and all that through these settings. But I just wanted these to blatantly stand out a little bit more than the rest of the entities on the map. So I made those slightly a bit larger. We also have the ability to add additional context. So there's one thing that's really bugging me about this map.
Okay.
And more or less that's that text overlapping. Like you can tell by how I'm constructing this map, I kind of like a little bit of symmetry, but even these objects that are here on the top, those names that we want on the map for added context are making me crazy where they're positioned.
Because you've got a line going through them. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. My OCD on that is also slightly triggered. Like, this is functional, and I can deal with this, but can I please change that?
Yes, and we can. So you can easily just go to position here within the text piece of the property panel, adjust that, and I could just say top center, for example.
Oh, and you did it for all of them at once, so it's not like click, flip a setting, click, flip a setting, click, flip a setting.
Yes, I think we would have adamantly agreed that we failed if we did not allow users to do some of these changes in bulk. And like, let's take this tricky one here. Let me move that somewhere else that makes sense, and maybe we go top left of the object.
But that tells me that you got to move the topology data center one also to the left somewhere.
Correct. So we can bump all these around I can even use just the alignment keys and kind of bounce this out a little bit. So there's lots of different ways in which we can have this, kind of formed. Again, it's kind of subjective to the user, but even with just the changes there that we've done so far, it seems like the map's a lot cleaner.
It's a little clearer, yeah. And that's the important part of a map. When we talked earlier about taking data and turning it into information that can then be translated to actionable work, this is kind of what you need to do.
Yeah, and again, it's about what type of data we need on that map, right? So if we had, for example, just the host names, but maybe I need a little bit more information to that user. Maybe this is going up on a knock screen, and I might not have people interacting with it.
Yeah, I as much as I love captions or display names or whatever we want to call them, I'm also still a slave to IP addresses. I still love custom properties for certain things. I like numeric information because this map is great, but I'm still, like you were talking, we're talking knock screen, I kind of have to hover.
Exactly.
Which is fine on a desktop or on a laptop, but on a knock, you typically don't have mouse control up there. So
exactly. So there is the text section here, and I can arbitrarily type in whatever I want. But we can actually do some pretty cool things where I can come in to add variables. And like you said, maybe I wanted IP address or something like machine type.
Okay.
So I can add in that information, insert selected variables, and we can make sure there's a character return there. And now we have a little bit more data. Now, we can take that a step further, and maybe there's additional information that you want without having to, again, interact with the map. So I can come in here and still click plus, and we're going to grab something simple like average response time. Now I selected that, but kind of a little pro tip here. It's documented, but if I hold the Shift key and click Insert Selected, what it does is actually add in the prefix and units associated with that metric for us, so we don't have to go and do that ourselves. But now, again, you can see I have different details, the maps, what type of server they are, what type of network device we have here, and average response time all within the map. And I'm pretty happy with the way this looks.
Yeah, and that would be incredibly helpful, especially if you're adding a lot of generic numeric type, like if you had average response time and percent up, or if it was interfaces, in, out, all those kinds of things. Being able to actually have the label at the front, the label. I mean, obviously the units is fantastic, but just the label alone. So if you're adding these in bulk, you understand. Oh, no, that 3 actually is percent loss, not errors and discards.
Exactly. Yeah, 100% agree. And the next thing we can kind of jump into is one that I'm sure a lot of customers wanted. As a matter of fact, when we came out with the last version of Maps, it's the first thing everyone asked for, which is all about this section here. And
can I change my icons?
Yes. Right, because the icons that come out of the box or the iconography that we provide may not speak to the users, at that particular organization. They may not make sense. So there's lots of different ways in which we can do this. For example, if I want to jump in here, I can see the default icon. I can click this drawer. You could see we provide a lot of different details. For this example, I'm probably going to use this here. Those are a little bit small. I want the icon to stand out. So I can actually even change the percentage that it takes up width wise. You know what? I actually like that for all things. So I'm going to go ahead and select all entities. There's quick little actions again to do the multi-select here. Yep. Save some time, save some clicks. And then you could tell when I have multi-selected, it's telling me that it does. And I'm going to change that to 70, and make that a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Some of those were smaller. We'll use that up a little bit, right? So again, now this map is starting to take a different shape. You did see a little bit where I could absolutely, and we'll go over some examples here in a minute, but where I could absolutely go through and highlight some different, examples that I bring in from outside of the Orion platform. I could import and use any of my own custom icons, the traffic light maps that we've seen. I have some examples of that, so we'll show some of that. But it's a pretty cool place to where I can customize. I can even change everything based on status, or if I wanted this to be a thumbs up or a skull and crossbones if it's down. There's lots of different ways in which we can add some visual appeal or what makes sense to my organization in a map.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with how the recipient of the map, the consumer of the map, the consumer of the dashboard that this map is going to live on, and the knock screen, how they're going to interpret this information. Because you mentioned like a service level, because that's essentially what IT does. We don't provide servers, we provide services. So having like a service level one that management can just kind of look at and be like, oh, cool, everything's green across the board. I don't have to worry about calling anyone today.
Exactly. And I love those maps. Those are really, like you said, it may not be deemed as a map, right? It's kind of a service level dashboard, if you will. So effectively with maps too, you can almost create any widget that you want to represent that data. So it's a really cool, unique piece.
Now, Jeff, as much time as you spend in that right-hand panel, you glaringly missed the slider for track history. I want to know about track history.
Yeah, track history is probably one of my favorite features that made it into this release, and it's about doing a little bit of time travel, if you will, through Orion. So Let's take a look real quick, and I can show you in my dashboard here. We jump in, and this is the same map that we've been building. You can see I've got a couple other widgets along with it, but in essence, I'm going to go into view mode, which is full screen interactive mode that allows me to interact with the map, see alerts, all sorts of different things. But the important piece that we want to bring up is, of course, view history. So when I click this button, we get a timeline, if you will. And Kevin, is everything okay?
Yeah. I mean, what's wrong? Everything looks fine to me.
Okay, I'm just going to continue here. Just bear in mind, we can only go back 7 days, Kevin.
Okay.
Okay. So in here, you could see that I have obviously places where the map was green and clear to where it was actually in a critical state. So we have a time slider down here. I can hover through. I actually have the ability to play through, and this really allows the users to see what was happening before an incident, after an incident, how things have changed, but it gives customers a unique way to troubleshoot their environment or their service or their network or anything else. And this even takes the power of PerfStack. So in this case, I can actually click on the connection here, and in my map, we'll bring up a PerfStack, giving me an hour before, hour after, and the interface information in this case, where I can troubleshoot further and take it to that next level. So by combining the power of Orion Maps and our performance analysis tool, we really give users a lot of flexibility in how they look at an incident.
Okay, that's amazing. It's something for the something went wrong this weekend crew, as opposed to the no, it's not a problem right now, but 6 people reported it this weekend. This is a tool that allows you to do that and then take that, turn it into pure data in the perf stack, and then make decisions moving forward. I also like that you can kind of see the stuff kind of come online and go offline, especially if there's like it's not necessarily a cascade failure, but if you have like a storage problem, well, that storage problem is only going to be a storage problem for a hot second, but then it's going to bubble up to the hypervisors, and then it's going to bubble up to this. Yeah, being able to actually see that in time slices is incredibly interesting.
Yep. So we really love what has happened in this release, and we really want to jump into kind of seeing customers' examples and what they're doing in their environments. I've already got texts and emails and lots of things from customers, Slack posts, and there's tons of examples out here. We walk through a lot, where we can see things like this last example going through, WPM transactions to the web front end, to the SQL database, right? That should make sense to a lot of users. Maybe a grouping dashboard. There's tons and tons of examples out here and ways to represent your information. So we'd love to see that get bubbled up and sent over to us so we can see how you're using your dashboards today.
Yeah, because everyone's going to have a slightly different take, whether you're building a dashboard board for yourself and a map for yourself as the monitoring engineer, that's one thing. But we also want you to share the ones you're building for your various teams. And obviously blank out anything that's sensitive, but being able to understand how people use this, that's where I got some of my best ideas. And some of the maps and perf stacks I've built since then have been completely community influenced. So, Jeff, thank you for all of your time. Obviously, you can find me on Thwack. Please ask us questions. And thanks again. Fantastic session, sir.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kevin.